Good evening and welcome to the Town of Rockland Select Board meeting for Tuesday, February 17, 2026. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Zioli, can you start us off?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for playback by WRPS at youtube.com/WRPS Rockland. Please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. First on the agenda, community announcements. Doug, anything?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The only announcement tonight is just a reminder to the public, there are no evening rec department programs this week due to school vacation week. So just a reminder, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve minutes from meeting of 2/3/26.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion in 2 seconds. All those in favor. This should be easy.
Yep.
I'm
Thank
actually
you.
recusing
And
myself. I wasn't
Tiffany
here.
is right, because she was not here for the last one. All right, next on the agenda, under new business, Council on Aging appointments, Diane Holden and Patricia Norton. Diane, why don't you come on up, seeing as you made the trip? Right up to the microphone. So this appointment was approved by COA Chair Andy McCarthy and Director Julie Burke. Dan, welcome. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what your interest is in joining the COA board.
All right, so it all started, I was secretary in my class. I've been president of the Boosters for 6 years in Rockland High. I've been involved St. Vincent de Paul. I've always wanted to do for other people, and this is just inclusive to that, along with taking care of my 98-year-old mother who has lived with me for 6 years. So it's just who I am, you know, just want to do for others. I forgot to shut it off.
You're out.
That might have just cost you your appointment. That's your ringtone? Okay, anybody have any,
I apologize.
Yes,
anybody have any other questions, comments for Diane?
yes. I really like your ringtone, by the way. Thank you for your service, and I'd be happy to welcome you on the board.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Likewise.
Yeah, Diane, this is a no-brainer. You've been a member of the community for a number of years. Your kids all grew up here. I have no qualms appointing you tonight. I'll entertain a motion to appoint.
Motion to appoint.
I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Yep.
That's unanimous.
Welcome.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
everybody.
All right, next up, we have Patricia Norton as a COA alternate. Tricia, same questions. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what interests you in the COA board.
Okay. My name is Patricia Norton, and I live at Leisure Woods. My story is much shorter than Diane's as far as town living. My husband and I moved here in 2020, so we're hitting almost 6 years here. I am a member and a regular visitor to the Council on Aging. I also am a retired school teacher. I believe that in the good work that the Senior Center does, and received a phone call from Andy McCarthy saying, put that to work, and so I'm happy to do that. I also serve with St. Vincent de Paul and the Holy Family Church, and I'm actually a board member for Quincy Catholic Academy, which is the school I retired teaching from back in Quincy.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
It says no prior experience with civic groups.
No.
You just listed a few.
Well, I'm pretty close to civic, yeah.
I appreciate you both stepping
Okay.
up to serve.
Yeah.
So hers has also been approved by COA Chair McCarthy and COA Director Julie Burke. I'll entertain a motion to appoint as an
Motion
alternate.
to appoint.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
You're welcome
Welcome.
aboard.
And you guys are welcome to stick around, but you're not required to. There you go.
She said, well, because we can stick around while we can use Mike's committee. She's my neighbor across the street.
Well, Mike knows me way back.
So next on the agenda, Senator John Keenan, Representative David DeCoste, legislative update, and FY27 state aid discussion. Gentlemen, welcome. Good evening. As we usually try to do, we try to have you guys in at some point during the budget process. You guys can give us a little bit of an update of what's going on up at the Hill, and we can give you guys a little bit of an update of what the needs of the community are and what we're going through down at this level. So I'll open it up to you guys to present what you guys have.
Great, well, thank you. It's great to be here with Representative DeCoste to give you a little sense of what's going on at the state level. As you probably know, being involved in the at local level, we're in the process of getting through our budget preparations with the idea that we will ultimately, in the House and then in the Senate, release our budgets. The governor has introduced her budget, which is about $62.8 billion, about a $63 billion budget, and that's up somewhat over last year, and it's based on consensus revenue figures that were established back in December, then into early January. Her budget is a little bit higher, accounts on more revenue than what was agreed upon by both the House, the Senate, and then also including the governor's Secretary of Administration and Finance. So the governor introduced her budget. In terms of local aid, it is a number that really could vary between now and the time a final budget is determined. Generally, there's not a big variation because, again, that consensus revenue figure is determined relatively early. But what's different this year, perhaps, than in past years, is that we just really don't know what's going to happen financially because of the uncertainty in Washington. But assuming that things stay as hoped, we can expect that there'll be some increases in local aid, unrestricted general government aid, and also in Chapter 70 funding. And I'll let Rep. DeCoste when we kind of give you a sense of what some additional funding in those accounts may mean or could mean for the town of Rockland and other communities. But at this stage, just to give you a sense of history, in FY26, which is the current fiscal year, the governor's proposed local aid, unrestricted local aid, was about $3.32 billion, and it ended up in the final budget at $3.29 billion. So the final budget ended up a little less in terms of unrestricted local aid. In FY25, it ended up just about at the number that the governor had proposed. She came in at $3.255 billion. The House was lower than that. The Senate matched it, and then ultimately, when it came out of conference committee and was signed by the governor, it contained the governor's $3.255. And going back to FY24, the governor had proposed $3.123, and it came in at about $3.16 in the final. So you can see they're generally pretty close. And so for the current year, the governor has proposed about $3.373 billion in unrestricted general government aid. And that's money that goes to municipalities to use pretty much as they wish. When it comes to Chapter 70, in the current fiscal year, for the upcoming fiscal year, the governor has proposed about $20.2 billion in Chapter 70 funding, and that's obviously school aid. Going back last year to give you a sense of the trends, FY26, or rather the current fiscal year, but the last time we finalized the budget, she came in at about $19.8 billion, and when the conference committee reported out and the governor signed the budget, it was at about $19.8 billion. So pretty much a match. Same thing in FY25, a little bit of a difference. The governor had proposed $18.6 billion, it came in at $18.7 billion. So there's not a big variation typically between what is shown in the governor's proposed budget and ultimately what ends up in the final budget. Again, this year, we hope that holds true because it is a slight increase over last year, but we just don't know because of federal issues. One of the pieces of legislation that's pending before the legislature right now is how the state will handle the tax issues, tax cuts, tax benefits that were included in the budget bill that came out of Washington. The governor has proposed legislation that would allow the state to capture a little bit of the money. Right now, we are essentially coupled with the federal tax bill, meaning when it comes to corporate tax and some other things, we match what the federal government does. The federal government is proposing changes, and so the state can decide whether to stay coupled and match those changes, decouple, meaning do something on their own, and many other states have done that. or to come up with kind of an in-between ground, and that's where the governor is right now. The governor is proposing that we delay some of the impacts of those tax cuts and use it to generate a little bit more revenue here. For instance, there's a pass-through entities component to the federal budget cuts that if the state kind of does a gradual approach rather than just decouples or even goes along with the cuts, could mean an additional funding for the state of about $296 million. And so it really depends on what the legislature does on those items between now and the time that the conference committee comes out with its final budget. In terms of process, the governor's introduced her budget, the House will do their budget in April, and the Senate will do our budget in May. To the extent there are differences, and we fully expect that there will be, that's always been the case, then a conference committee will be formed, differences between the House budget and the Senate budget will be reconciled, and the goal is to have a consensus or agreed upon budget to the governor by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. We have not met that date consistently in the last several years, but last year we were a little better than we've been in the past. And so the goal will be to get the governor a budget by June 30th or as close to that date as possible, so that there'll be some predictability for municipalities especially. In terms of the local aid, it is a #1 priority. I know in the Senate and for me personally, we meet with the chair of the Ways and Means Committee pretty regularly. We had a meeting just last week. We'll have a meeting probably within the next few weeks again on priority items. And each time that I go and meet with the Ways and Means chair, my first priority is local aid, Chapter 70, unrestricted general government aid, and then also additional money for Chapter 90, which is used for roads and things of that sort, roads particularly. My goal has always been to increase the Chapter 90 funding and then to make it more predictable by having a multi-year allocation so that we do not have to go through the appropriation process every time. To me, it makes no sense. We know what we're going to approve. We approve it, and then the next year we're right back at it, doing the same thing, going through the same process, even though we know what we're going to approve. So I've allocated for a multi-year allocation that would give the municipalities the ability to get at least a 2-year allocation and then budget it as they see fit. A lot of towns, a single-year appropriation isn't enough to do a whole lot of work, and having the ability to have 2 years appropriation and know what they are would give them some flexibility. Just a quick snapshot on our revenues. January revenues have come in. January revenues typically account for about 10% of the annual revenues for the state, and that's due in part, that's a pretty substantial, I think it's the 4th highest month that we rely on. That's high typically because we get quarterly payments in January. The highest month is April. That's when we get people filing their tax returns and when we get a better sense of what the revenue picture will look like. Even though January was a good month for the Commonwealth, we were up by about 8.4% over the January 2025 number. That sounds really good, but we are in the same situation now as we were a year ago. And we closed out fiscal year 2025, despite January being a good month last year, we closed out the fiscal year with about $52 million in surplus, which sounds like a lot of money, but when you're talking about a $60 billion budget the current year, give or take, $52 million is not a lot of money. Is razor thin in terms of whether or not we finish the year balanced or with a deficit or a surplus. And so the Secretary of Administration and Finance last week when he appeared before us on the Revenue Committee indicated that he expects the same outcome this year as last year. Even though January revenue figures are good, he expects things to be very, very tight when we close the books on FY26. And that's even with about $700 million of unexpended revenue included in the FY26 current fiscal year budget. That was put in there in anticipation of the uncertainty in Washington. And so we go into the next fiscal year as we plan for it with that same degree of uncertainty. And I can just give you a quick example, then I'll turn it over to the representative as to how that uncertainty kind of shows. I was at a public health hearing on a Monday morning at about 9 a.m. Commissioner of Public Health appeared before us and said, before I get into my prepared remarks, I'd just like to convey that last night at about 11 o'clock, I think is what he said, we got notice from the federal government that we lost about $120 million. Just like that. And that's money that was used, planned to be used, budgeted, allocated for substance use programming. And it was gone by way of an email on a Sunday evening. So it highlights a little bit of the uncertainty that we face. So that's kind of the general picture as we move forward. Local aid, always a big priority of ours, and we'll continue to make that a priority. And then a final point, one of the things that the representative and I regularly vote on in the state budget, money for different grant programs. And we're happy to do that. We're even happier when we do that and our local communities take advantage of those. And here in Rockland, you have a great team, and that team has been very competitive when it comes to applying for the grants that are funded through the state budget process. And they've been very successful in getting a lot of grants in a lot of different areas over the last couple of years. And that has helped the town, but it really makes, it's really satisfying to us, whether it's the school department, the town administration, and then the various departments within town. They do a really good job of searching out those little pockets of money, searching out those grants, getting the applications in, making sure the applications are done right, and then ultimately being rewarded the funding. And so I just want to thank the folks that work in the town every day for doing that work.
Thank you, Senator.
It's pretty thorough. The Senator mentioned that, and Mike, you and I had discussed this, John, I think long ago we had discussed this in terms of what an extra $1 billion would mean this, and under the unrestricted government aid, if we were given an extra $1 billion, in the case of Rockland, it'd be about, it looks like it'll be about 5.8 million, more. So that's just an answer to your question. If you had an extra $1 billion in unrestricted, in my caucus, we used to, and I think we will begin at the urging of myself and several others, certainly Allison Sullivan, and bipartisan, by the way, they're members of both parties, that we would be looking at simply taking a piece of budgets in terms of supplemental budgets and just dedicating it to that, saying, look, let's fence part of any additional revenue that comes through, that we have the ability to have a supplemental and send it just using the government, unrestricted government aid formula. And I think 5.8 million would help you a little bit out of the hole that you're in now.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt.
If we, and that is one of the strategies we will be using. And again, in terms of spending, I know that is always a problem. And so we've increased spending under the governor's proposal 18.8%. And we will see how much of that comes down here. Of course, the formula is a little bit different, I understand. But my first earmark always, and the Senator and I work on earmarks together, because again, we share things and pieces of things. We certainly share the VOTAC, and that's going to be, that will be significant spending coming to the district in the future. And if Rockland is any indication, we'll probably be able to do that on time and below budget. And it's my hope in any case. Rockland Abington Water Works, we work directly with them for earmarks. And this year we're working way out beyond what we normally do, meaning much farther out in the budget process as we do the housing authorities. And so just towards that, because people tend to forget those things, we're looking at funding there. And again, the housing authorities, they have the ability to pull some grants. The last housing bill we passed actually had some additional possible funding in terms of grants, and we'll certainly look at, number one, making them aware of it, and hopefully they can apply to everything that they can possibly use, potentially. Other than that, you're very thorough. Mike, I sent that to you later than I have, but if everyone's got that, the chart at the back was just a what if. And that's it. I guess we'd open to questions if anyone has any questions.
So I'll open up to questions from members of the board, and then I do have obviously Doug and then Jane Hackett, who is going to be our school superintendent come July 1. But she's here tonight to kind of present to you guys the state of the budget as it pertains to the school and how both of us, the school and the town, we're in a lot of trouble from this standpoint. And Senator Keenan, I mean, you saying that, you don't expect that last year it was 3.32 billion. This year, then it came out to 3.2 billion after you guys presented. The governor's budget was 3.3 billion. and then it came down to 3.2. That's the scariest thing I've ever heard for us, because we're already, bleeding right now. So if that number comes down at all, we're in significant trouble here. I believe we already are in significant trouble here. And there are a lot of things that I think both Doug and Jane will present to you guys, for you guys to bring back to the State House. If they are even listening, and it's not you guys have always been great. You guys did an excellent job pushing the charter through to the point where it's at. Senator, especially, want to thank Mark Stern in your office.
great.
He was incredible. He was an incredible partner working with Doug throughout the entire process. You guys were excellent. You guys did everything we asked, and we're right at the very end of that process, which is great. But it seems as though Beacon Hill has become a little bit tone deaf to the needs of the suburban communities, and that's very frightening, because our issues aren't going away, and they're just as important and as big as those of the larger municipalities. So I'll open it up to any questions from any members of the board.
Yeah, I got a couple.
Okay, Steve?
So I did some look back about the last 13 years, what's available on the state website for revenue growth, or at least revenue to Rockland year over year. It averaged about 5% in those times. We're looking at about a 0.87% increase from last year. It is the lowest increase in the last 14 years now. So it makes me wonder, is expected revenue year over year expected to be down to that degree, or is it the result of other new programs that are being spun up?
So the revenue forecast for FY '27 is about 2.2% above the current fiscal year FY '26. And that seems like it's a decent increase, but that's down substantially from what we've seen year over year in the past several years. And it's expected that that 2.2% growth will be eaten up substantially by our health insurance costs through our Mass Health program and through our health programs for state employees. That's going to eat up a pretty substantial chunk of that 2.2% growth. And so there's not a whole lot new proposed in this budget, well, likely to be proposed in the final budget. The governor has shifted some money, has reallocated, has put some new programs in there. There is a concern that while the governor and the legislature have to ultimately pass a balanced budget, and that we have to introduce, as part of that process of getting to a balanced budgets, there is some concern about whether the governor's budget would be balanced other than some assumptions she makes, for instance, on the pass-through entities end of things and allocating funds in different ways. So there's a concern that even though we're projecting 2.2% revenue growth, she factors that into her budget. It looks balanced. There are some things in the budget that are based on assumptions that if those assumptions don't occur, then that budget is not balanced. And we, the House and the Senate, are looking at that as we prepare our budgets. So things are really tight. And I talked about uncertainties. One of the scariest things out there in terms of the state and its budget abilities is a ballot question, whether state income tax stays at 5% or is cut to 4%. That's a 20% cut, and we just don't know what will happen if that ballot question passes. It may not impact fiscal year '27, but going forward, it could have a really, really substantial impact on the state's budget and how much money the state is able to allocate to municipalities in unrestricted general government aid and in Chapter 70 funding. So with all the uncertainty at the federal level, add on to that a ballot question that could cut state revenues, income tax from 5% to 4%. Now, some would argue that that 1% cut from 5 to 4, it's 1% on paper, it's a 20% cut overall. If that happens, maybe that will spur the economy, and that we'll have greater growth, and that we'll realize the benefits of that. Unknown at this stage.
So I want to jump in real quick, Steve, just because the senator brought up health insurance. You mentioned that there's great increases. What is the governor's office and what is the State House doing about those increases? Because we're running into a 19.7% increase on our health insurance, which I actually consider that to be robbery. Right? It's disgusting, and it should not happen. And we budgeted conservatively at a 14% increase, and we thought that we'd come in lower than that, and it came back at 19.7%. That's appalling. Like, who's driving the car up there? I mean, what's going on?
I wish I had the easy answer. I don't. I can tell you that there have been proposals by the governor to change or modify plans in the GIC. And that would include changing or increasing deductibles, increasing co-pays, limiting coverages. One of the things that has become a big cost driver are and I can't remember the medical name for them, but things like Wegovy, those medications that are
GLP-1s.
used for.
GLP-1.
But those aren't covered by insurance now anyway.
They have been, and.
In the past, but not
yes,
anymore.
but they may not be going forward.
Yeah, they weren't,
Under.
I think they said it's like January 1st, people were saying, so.
So,
That required significant
that's,
comorbidity.
that has been a big cost driver. In terms of Mass Health, the same thing's going on. They're looking at plan modifications, what coverages will be drawn back, what will be the same. Against the pressures on the health insurance, there is still a pretty substantial advocacy for covering more things under our health insurance, whether it be for people with chronic diseases. One of the proposals has been, and it's getting a little bit more attention, is to provide things like insulin cost-free to people. When you do that initially, it's a cost increase. But in the long term, you hope that people will have greater access to it, will use it, won't make the financial decision not to use the medication and end up in an emergency department. And so those are longer-term impacts of some of the policy changes that we can make in the short term. It is generally changing, at least on GIC, deductibles, co-pays, what's covered, and in Mass Health, there's also the redetermination that's going forward that has resulted in pretty substantial savings. But all those things are being done until there is some sort of heavy government hand on what providers can pay. We're going to continue to see these increases, and there's a lot of systemic issues as to why we're seeing those cost increases.
Steve, I didn't catch how many years back you looked on that.
It was 13-year look back
All
on the
right,
state
well, that's
website.
pretty substantial, and I think you'd agree that, and even Governor Baker used to, there were better years, and certainly when he was first elected, things, I would say, became pretty good, and pretty healthy with the economy, and of course, COVID, we got a shot of money that we'll probably never see again, which, by the way,
Right.
we still have to pay back a piece of that. Kudos to the Plymouth County government, because they had the forethought, the ability, the only one in the state that had identified money. And Governor Baker, to their credit, they stood up to a lot of pressure from the administration not to do that. And all of the towns in this, in Plymouth County did much, much better. They had sticking with Plymouth, and we should be grateful for that. But again, we had a lot of wind to our backs for a while, in terms of the economy doing well and spending on COVID, and that's drying up. And of course, as you know, there are other issues, and as far as the cost drivers, I can send you it's an interesting report from the Pioneer Foundation and Max Taxpayers Foundation that you might look at. There's some, they dealt with a great deal of specificity in terms of what's driving some of it. And as the Senator says, there are certainly cost drivers on a national basis, and then there are other things going on specific to Massachusetts.
Yeah, it'd be great if you want to send that over.
Can I just
Yeah.
add just one quick point? So kind of give you a sense of the politics of this at the State House. The governor announced the plans to modify GIC, for instance, co-pays, deductibles, things of that nature. There was a fairly quick pushback by members of the legislature to making those changes. A letter was circulated. I did not sign on to the letter. I thought it was premature to just dismiss what the governor is proposing. The House will have its budget process. We'll have our budget process. I think, from my perspective in the Senate, that before we say, hey, don't do those, don't follow through on those proposals to reduce GIC costs, don't do it. I think we should wait over the course of the next couple of months, see how the financial picture shakes out, work on it, see if there are different proposals from the governors, see if some of those proposals can be adopted, all with the idea that clearly we want to provide as good a health care coverage to municipal and state employees through the GIC as we can, but to do so in as affordable way as possible. So while many members jumped on and signed a letter saying, we don't want the governor's cost-cutting proposals to take effect, I didn't sign that letter. I'd rather take a more cautious approach, I think more pragmatic approach, see what happens over the next couple of months, see where else we can realize savings, and then go forward and not just dismiss the governor's proposals, but work with her and work with both the House and Senate and healthcare providers and the insurers particularly to see if we can come up with something a little better.
Yeah, I mean, we're faced with the same, as Mike mentioned, the same decisions, right, in order to try to eke back some of that 19.7% proposed increase. So can understand why the governor's looking at all of that, right? It's what every town in this state is going to have to look at, and probably over the country, right? Healthcare costs are rising. I come with a healthcare background, provider payments, it's all razor thin margins wherever you look. And knowing that we have health and human services funding being ripped out, especially for some of our most vulnerable community in the substance abuse funding, it's appalling. It's absolutely disgusting. You mentioned that the state's looking at going to a 4% income tax rate, which is, a bit cutting off your nose to spite your face, I believe. For such a progressive state, it's amazing to me that we've made it this far without a progressive tax structure. Knowing that even in property taxes, we are prevented from implementing any kind of progressive tax structure. It's, in essence, creates a regressive tax structure where the bottom earners in the lower property value properties end up paying more as a percentage with that flat tax rate. Is there any discussion, is there any movement that you've seen over the years in moving to a more progressive tax structure in the state?
There has been a lot of discussion about that, and it manifests itself in the Fair Share Amendment to the millionaire's tax. And that was a workaround the constitutional requirement that basically we have a flat tax. And if you recall, the first time the Fair Share Amendment was attempted, it was shot down by the courts because the use of the money, the question was not specific as to how the money would be used. And so it took 2 attempts for that to pass constitutional muster, basically to pass and become law, and in the process pass constitutional analysis. So we are prohibited, like the Constitution, from having a progressive income tax program. And so it would require a constitutional amendment or some other creative workaround. And there has been a lot of talk about changing the Constitution here in Massachusetts. There's been a lot of talk about finding creative ways. But while that's occurring, there's enough support, it appears, to get the question to cut the tax on the ballot. And so that's kind of where we're at. One group saying we've got to change things, make it more progressive, make it fairer, and another group saying 5% is too much.
There is legislation, I thought, somewhere to actually repeal Prop 2.5. Just for the record, I won't be supporting it because I don't think the problem is taxation. I think the problem is spending. But there are people who'd like to move in that direction. We already have, if you look at the budget, a large redistributionist component, such that in many cases the state directly subsidizes certain cities, and in some cases almost the entire city school budgets are subsidized. So we already have a piece of redistribution. There are people in the legislature who think that the suburbs are undertaxed and that there should be larger component of money moving from outside the cities to the urban areas, and largely urban areas. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be areas of rural poverty, because we have quite a bit of that. But to the governor's credit, by the way, if I had a choice last year to vote for what the governor proposed and what we ended up with, I like the governor's proposal. I think it was back then she actually, I only point towards you because you're going to be running my council on aging, which I love. But the governor actually, I think, was going to triple the senior circuit breaker, and that would make a huge difference to address the inequity, and particularly the problems that our older citizens of limited and modest medium income, although it goes up to $76,000, I think, this year. So she was going to triple that, and I much would have preferred to see tax credits go in that direction. than some of the things we ended up spending money on.
Yeah, I think special interests is probably the wrong way to go. Unrestricted free aid, to let the towns decide, is probably the better way. We know best where our services are needed and need to be funded versus the state level. It prevents us from making those decisions. You know, the grant monies are great for all these different programs that we've applied for, and you're right. People in our leadership positions do a fantastic job applying for them. But it really is for capital use, right? It's not for operational use. You know, if it's a spending problem we have, I would really like to see where our spending problem is, because we're running razor thin. The only place we can really take from is public safety or the schools. Those are our big buckets. And I know you don't want to see public safety touched, based on our conversations. So if it's a spending problem, I don't know what it is.
Well, I don't think he's saying it this way, it's a spending problem on our end, I think he's saying it's a spending problem on the state level, right?
But it's
Yeah.
resolved, it's resolved. A lot of this, it solves the cities saying that they need more funding from the smaller towns, from the suburbs, by going to a progressive tax structure. It would allow for those in wealthy communities to pay their fair share, while the people in rural poverty and in poverty in the cities to pay, you know, a percentage of their income that is commensurate with those that are making a higher income. I hope you'll both continue to look at a constitutional amendment to allow us to move to that kind of structure, because regressive taxation is not the way forward. That's all I have.
Anybody else, any questions?
Yeah, I had some. So, two of our biggest expenditures are, well, aside from health insurance and retirement, are our water and sewer systems. And as you know, our sewer system is in trouble. So, what do you guys have in mind for bringing some money in this economy to help out the water and sewer department?
Yeah, on a micro level, we're down there either directly or indirectly to the people who are operating in Abington, Rockland, or Norwell, or Hanover, or Hanson, in terms of what they need and where they can get it. We walked through once, and it was interesting that you heard a number of different stories about how much was needed and how much needed to be addressed. I am not sure. I can tell you that there will be some federal people down here looking at the area in general, but keep in mind, there's also another side, as you know, on the EPA, because we have a draw limit. So, in terms of what, you know, front stream right into the North River, and we have a problem there. So I think at that point, it would probably be addressed at a federal level, and we may be able to do it in bond. Particularly, I'd like to see more of these environmental bonding bills address this and create funds that can be applied to this directly. We haven't, I don't think we've done that. We've done great small bridges and culverts and that type of thing, and many of our towns have taken care of that, but we probably have to do either an environmental bond bill that addresses this, and that's what we may have to end up doing. Again, there's, and that would be pretty high on my list, because I don't think that the towns themselves are going to be able to do that. And again, when you build a school, that is how it's addressed. And they need to, number one, identify the problem, and then probably go through a bond bill where you can take a look at that and apply.
Yeah, no, and just as a follow-up and understanding the issue of be better almost to do block grants to communities as opposed to make them apply for these grant programs. Rockland recently was awarded about $800,000 in the Housing Work Infrastructure Program with the idea of improving the sewer system, so there could be more hookups on the system. And then there was a grant, a relatively small dollar one, about $50,000 to the Abington Rockland Water Works, that would allow them basically to do some hydrant leak prevention, detection and prevention programming, with the idea that hydrants can be a source of leaks. Not a lot of money, not a big source in terms of the impact of a leak on the sewer system, but it's those types of grants that are out there, the $800,000 mass Housing Works infrastructure program was a little bit more substantial. So that's one of the ways that we can try to have an impact. But I agree with the representative, it's not enough. The last time I was at the sewer treatment plant, what struck me is that it's doing pretty well in terms of its day-to-day operation. They do quite well with what they have to work with, but that plant is not going to last forever. And, you know, it's a pretty substantial need. And we're seeing it in the other part of my district where Braintree, Holbrook, and Randolph Joint Water Works are putting in a new water treatment plant, and it highlights how expensive it can be. So between the water supply side and the sewer side, we have infrastructure needs throughout. One of the answers for water anyway through the region is to bring the MWRA further south, and there's a group of communities that are working on that with the idea that if we can get the water to the base, then it has the ability to go beyond that. And there was a pretty substantial grant to get the process of bringing MWRA water to the base sooner rather than later. But still, that doesn't fully address the sewer issues as you've brought up. So
Yeah, I mean, like 3 years ago, they were giving estimates of about 100 million for a new sewer
Yeah.
plant.
right.
And I remember when we went on the tour of the sewer plant, that must have been, what, like 4 years ago, maybe? 3 or 4 years
I think it
ago?
was during COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and you remember that, Tiffany?
I
We
do.
did that. So, and at that point, you know, there was some low-hanging fruit, and I think Rep. DeCoste, he said he could probably get 5 to 6 million for that. I'm wondering if that's possible, just getting a, you know, in this economy to get something like that this year. 5 to 10 million even.
I could tell you, yes,
Mhm.
we'll do it, but
Was
realistically,
it possible?
it's going to be, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it
Mhm.
would be difficult. In the past, we've been able to work together, as the representative said, on earmarks.
Mhm.
Nothing super substantial, but have
Mhm.
had the ability to direct state funding to municipalities, Rockland, for some specific needs, not real big money needs.
Mhm.
I'm not so sure we're going to have that ability
Mhm.
in the upcoming budget process.
Well, that's good to know. to
Yeah,
prepare
and I hate to
for.
be,
Mhm.
Mr. Negative on this, but I'd rather give a realistic portrait of, a picture of where we're at,
Okay.
so that you can plan, and if by chance we come across $6 million to do water and sewer, to do sewer here, then that's great. But I do not see that happening by way of an individual appropriation for the town. And
Okay.
sad to say that, but I
Mhm.
think that's realistically what we can expect.
Okay. Thanks.
John?
Yeah, I guess my one question, in addition to being on the board, I'm also the treasurer collector for another community. And one thing that I'm hearing some chatter about up on Beacon Hill that really concerns me is some changes you all are thinking making to excise tax and the ability to mark people who do not pay them at the registry. I cannot tell you what a horrible idea that is. That is our only lever that we have to get people to collect. Here in Rockland, we issue 20,000 excise tax bills a year. If you take away the ability to, you know, if somebody doesn't pay it, that's our only leverage
Just
to
so
get
up
them
there, I
paid.
don't mean to interrupt you, John, but
Yeah.
you sit on the transportation committee, is it the summer? Yeah. And he always shows up, which is good, because it's not always the case on that committee, but we've sat through a number. And the counter argument against that, and I will not, I will not belabor it, but the counter argument against it, Steve might be sensitive to this, was that it unfairly impacts individuals in some communities, across some groups. And it is also, which is a fact, it does. And it actually impedes people who are trying to go to work, but all of a sudden, they may not have their license to go there. I'm not saying that, in fact, my tendency is agreeing with you, but there's a counter argument for that. If I had to bet a month's salary, I would tell you that I think they're gonna be argued, but like virtually everything else, I think it's gonna get moved somewhere. and it's not gonna get to your governor. Unlike the charter, which I would bet a month's pay, it's gonna go to the governor. But that idea always is circulated. If you had to bet a month's pay, I think it's gonna die somewhere. And we did hear from many assessors that said just what you said, that there was going to be collectors and assessors. That would be a problem. That would be a problem.
Yes, so the governor in the Municipal Empowerment Act, which he filed back in January of 2025, had some provisions relative to excise tax. There were the financial considerations and giving a local option to municipalities to increase what they collect on excise, and then there was the process considerations as to how it would be collected, and I think that's where the issue of, that you're talking about, kind of.
It's where if people don't pay it, what
First
happens?
surfaced, right. So the Municipal Empowerment Act has not passed. It has been, parts of it have been reported out of committee. Those parts that dealt with the finance, for instance, increasing the motor vehicle excise tax, that was initially referred to study, and on the House side, then it was taken out of study and recommitted to the Revenue Committee, where it now is. There were several sections where that happened. Some of the more policy-directed initiatives are in committee as well. They were not sent to study, so they are technically still in process. And I'd have to go and check and see exactly where that excise tax collection process piece is. But I appreciate the comments. It's good to hear.
Yeah, I guess anytime you have both the MMA and the Mass Treasurer, Collectors Association, both suggesting or strongly recommending that you all don't do something, you all probably shouldn't do it, because we're the ones who are actually, dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. So I guess my advice to all of you up on Beacon Hill is to, to listen to the professionals who are kind of on the ground and kind of know what's going on, and honestly stop trying to fix things that aren't broken. Just on a semi-related note, I mean, what y'all did to the tax title law is atrocious. Y'all made a major cluster out of that, to be perfectly blunt, and I hope y'all don't do that with excise.
Thank you.
All right, so I think I'll go to Doug and Jane now to kind of present to you guys, just so you can guys see kind of a snapshot of what we're up against here in the town of Rockland. And I might, and anybody else from the board that has questions during the course of the presentation, feel free to, by all means, you guys,
Yes, please.
you're dismissed.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
You're welcome.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. See you at the polls.
Yeah.
Bye, Maureen.
Take it easy. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Good
Mrs.
night.
Bowler.
Thank you.
That's what happens when you introduce me and I just clear the room. That's what happens. I get it.
They must have seen your act before.
I get it,
I'm out.
yeah. I want to thank the senator and the state rep for being here, and as Mike already said, I want to thank you both personally for your help with the town charter. We really do appreciate it. We are on the home stretch, so thank you for that.
If I could, as a quick aside, to Rich Petty and his team, I'm on the Government Study Committee in Norwell, and we are using your charter in large measure to make modifications to ours. This time, we will make sure that once it is done, we take it up to House Counsel first before we vote on it, so we have everything. I know you did, there was some changes subsequent. But it's just to say it's a very good charter, and it makes our life a little bit easier because we're able to copy and paste in a lot of cases. So it's a well-done product.
Great, thank you.
Well, the Collins Center was really helpful with that as well. So they're good to partner with.
So I wanted to share just one chart that I thought would, and hopefully you can, I'm short so you can see it over my head. On this table, this shows really how we're up against it this year. So on the left side here, these are our major sources of revenue. The big bar on the bottom is our entire Prop 2.5 increase in tax revenue plus new growth. And then on top of that is our state aid. And you can see the raw number there, it's $176,000, but as Steve O'Donnell noted, that's a 0.87% increase. And I cannot stress enough how terrible that is for the town of Rockland. And I've looked at the numbers in the past, and I appreciate you being honest, and you're not trying to give unrealistic expectations, but that's a really tough number for us. So if you look over to the right, these are our just just two of our large expense categories. The big one on the bottom is our health insurance increase. That's the 19.7% increase that we're facing this year. So that's a $1.7 million, over a $1.7 million increase. On top of that is $444,000 of an increase to our Plymouth County retirement assessments. So you can see the imbalance there. Just health insurance alone, but when you add in the Plymouth County retirement, it's dwarfing all of our revenue. And the state aid is how we in Rockland, we're much more dependent on that than some of our more affluent neighbors. We're really reliant on this, and 0.87, the math just doesn't work. And so, I'm sitting here with Assistant Superintendent Hackett, who'll be the superintendent next year. She can speak in much more detail about our largest department, not only in terms of, raw dollars, but also largest in terms of unfunded mandates from the state. And I think it's really important that you do hear from her. But I wanted to show you just kind of graphically, what we're up against. And, we're taking all kinds of actions to control our healthcare expenditures, all the things that every community should be doing. But as you noted, the state's facing this. Every town in our region is, the country is, so it's not unique to us. But the 0.87 is just really crippling us this year. But I'll turn it over to Jane to talk a little bit about some of the specific school issues.
Hi, thank you for coming, both of you, and thanks for inviting. Dr. Cron is away today, but we do have the chair of the school committee, Joe Maroney, vice chair Jamie Hennessy, and member Michelle Bissonette also here today. So, thank you again for coming. Just sort of highlight a little bit more within that slide from a Chapter 70 perspective, although the governor has proposed a 3.3% increase in Chapter 70 for Rockland, that once it churns through the Chapter 70 formula, that only comes out to a 1.56% increase in the Chapter 70, even though it says on the DESE website they round it up to 2%. It's actually 1.56% of an increase, which is much lower than many of our direct neighbors are receiving. So for a dollar amount, it's $315,520.
Jane, who are the direct neighbors? Might give them a better sense.
Situate, Hingham, Duxbury, and Norwell.
Yeah, there's a little bit more affluent than the town of Rockland.
Are all receiving percentages in the 2% range. And so, I know listening to you, this seems sort of silly to ask, but in prior years, you've been able to do joint resolutions, the two houses, two branches together doing joint resolutions for local aid in Chapter 70 earlier in the budget process, so we know exactly what our number is before we go into our town meeting. So if there was a way to be able to do that and give us a final number, hopefully bigger, that would be helpful. But the two things, I think, the percentage-wise sort of tells the story that the Chapter 70 formula in and of itself is broken. And I think you folks were very supportive in that last year when you authorized the commission to review the Chapter 70. And that commission did an absolutely fabulous job. We participated, Town of Rockland participated in the school department, and Mr. Lapp, we participated in that process. And I learned a tremendous amount about Chapter 70. And one thing I definitively came away with is that enrollment decline is not the only problem with Chapter 70. There are many other smaller factors within that formula. It's not just the enrollment decline statewide, and it's not just the enrollment decline in Rockland or in neighboring communities. It's relative wealth, it's income, etc. The different factors that go into it. It is enough to put anyone to sleep with the worst case of insomnia, to study the Chapter 70 formula. But for those of us who do it for fun, it in fact is highly complex. And I'd really urge you to listen to the commission, because I learned a ton. All my peers and colleagues who are on it learned a tremendous amount. And I think they're probably going to come away with some really good structural takeaways that could be very helpful in the distribution of the Chapter 70 that's presented by the governor in every budget in every year. So, and that's sort of like a long-term scenario. But on the short term, two things that the school department would like to sort of present out is circuit breaker, which is not the senior circuit breaker, but the reimbursement that school districts receive directly for out-of-district costs. In the governor's budget, it is funded at 75% for both transportation and for tuition. However, that's partially funded, I believe, Senator, with a FY26 supplemental appropriation going in. There is a bill in the House and in the Senate to increase the circuit breaker reimbursement statutorily from 75% to 90%. We believe that addressing the circuit breaker is a far more direct and equitable distribution of funds for communities, because even if you gave us additional, if you increased the 3.3% to 3.5 or to 4%, still churning through the formula, I don't think Rockland and many other communities would actually get that much of an increase. However, if you increase the circuit breaker from 75% to 90%, that equally dollar for dollar would, whatever community spends, whatever each community would spend would be reimbursed at that higher rate, and therefore would have more of an impact across the board for all school districts and municipalities. The last thing is the review of out-of-district providers. The out-of-district are for students who we can't serve their needs in district in our school system and have to go what we refer to as out-of-district. Those rates are set by OSD, not by DESE, outside any review process. And the last several years, they've exceeded Proposition 2.5, and they've exceeded Prop 2.5 and our Chapter 70 increases. This year, they're proposed at 3.04%. Last year, it was at 3.6%, and the year before that was the catastrophic year of the 14.9% increase. So OSD has approved out-of-district rates disproportionately to what all school districts can absorb and afford. In addition to that, there's also what's called the program review process, where individual providers of out-of-district services can appeal to DESE and ask for an increase that is higher than the percentages established by OSD. We've already received notification in Rockland of 2 such providers who are seeking additional tuition increases above the 3.69% that OSD has already informed us that we're going to have. If those take place, if those are granted, it's going to be an additional 8 to 12% increase of tuition rates on those individual schools. So there's been a lot of exploration of this, and 2 bills have been filed, one in the House, one in the Senate, on circuit breaker, and I believe the new commissioner at DESE, Commissioner Martinez, is looking at this as well. But OSD's involvement in rate setting just seems arbitrary and outside of the process. And then the ability to do this program review without any input from the affected school districts who have to pay the bill is troubling. So those are just 3 ideas outside of the, I know you folks don't have a printing press. None of us do. But 3 ideas of ways that the state could help all school districts, and Rockland in particular.
Thank you.
You said you had questions about why OSD is involved in setting rates. That's a good question. I will get an answer to you.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
It might be entirely arbitrary. For instance, it's kind of far afield, but it isn't. In the post commission, which our police chief and everyone else was deal with, they tucked in, what, 1, 2, 3 psychologists? Only board, and you've got to wonder why they're there. You've got people who have never walked a beat, never served in uniform as a police officer, in a position to set policy and second guessing sometimes. So it might be just it's a good question to bring up.
Yeah, to be candid, I don't think OSD knows why they're involved.
I mean,
And I mean that in the nicest of ways, their own,
sometimes when these things are written, you have, the speaker will have, and then the governor will appoint, and by the time you're done, you've got
That's
people
right.
who shouldn't be there sitting on board, so. I'd never heard that before, thank you.
Jim, can you speak to some of the other unfunded mandates within your budget? Just that they might be able to help you guys, but they might be able to help you with, like, the most current ones, like, I mean, I know for a fact that it costs, that we're giving $50,000 for special ed per student, but a special ed student goes outside of district, it's $246,000, right? Like, that's, why the great disparity? And I'm not picking on special ed by any means,
Well-
but why is there such a disparity? Why isn't it funded at $246,000 if they're not district by the state?
well,
If that's what it costs to educate.
the circuit breaker program attempts to address that
Yeah.
by providing reimbursement. And that's why we're advocating for greater reimbursement rates within circuit breaker, because it does in fact work. It's a program that works, and it works well, and it's audited, and it's maintained, and it's very strict in its oversight. We educate every child in Rockland, no matter what their need is, and what situation they come from. Some students we can't serve within our walls, and that's disappointing to the staff involved. And no one wants to send a student out of district. The best thing for them to be is with their peers, and to be within their community. And we've reduced our out of district from 84 students to 29. Over the course of the last 10 to 12 years under Dr. Linda Maniglia, who's our current director and retiring director of pupil services. So, we educate who comes in the door, no matter what their needs are. And we do the best we can and do everything we can to keep in them. What we're asking for is the state to increase its partnership with us in absorbing the costs, of those needs that randomly impact districts from a move-in. One move-in, 2 move-outs can change the entire climate of floor of a school.
How does the state justify that?
In required.
I've never heard of well, I mean, I can give you a justification, and that is that some children, I guess it would come down to fairness, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, all right? But again, in one town I'm very familiar with, you're right, I think it was 2 children, between the 2 of them, came up with almost $3 million in charges for a while. This was a while back when I was a selectman, but I've heard this. I think the argument would be that every child deserves the best that we can do with them, and sometimes the best that we can do with them is very expensive. Is that what we hear? I think that's would be the.
Well, I mean, I completely agree, but I'm saying that shouldn't be the ownership of the town.
Well, I agree with you, and there has been, and I've supported it. There have been.
If $246,000 is what it costs to educate the child, then that should be what the state is funding the town to pay,
Right.
to educate the child, not $50,000. Then they go out of district and we're responsible for the rest.
And
That's not a recipe for success.
I would agree with you, and I know it's far afield and only really is related to each other in the name, but for instance, a senior circuit breaker, that's carried entirely by the state. I don't view my elderly people as special interest people. I just look at elderly citizens, but I would say you're right, and I think if you see the problem with and I don't want to get the senator in trouble, so I'll speak for myself, but the problem, once upon a time, we were able to vote on individual bills. And you would go back and you would vote on bill after bill after, we don't do that anymore. We collect everything, and it's a dog's breakfast. And there's some good stuff and there's some really bad stuff, and there's no way we can vote out, and it has to do with, I'll leave it alone, my opinion has to do with a one-party state. But even back in the day, we were able, when we had one prevalent, we vote, we can't do that anymore. I think, and there are dozens of bills that I've had this conversation with probably 50 or 100 Democratic colleagues. There are bills that if went up on the board, it would be 160 to 0. just to move this on. And I think what you're talking about is probably one of those bills where there'd be very little or no opposition to it. And I know I've talked to you about, I would be here all night. I could give you example after example where the most liberal and the most conservative representative would support probably a couple hundred bills. Some of them are minor, maybe a few would be major. But that just doesn't get moved, Mike, and it's one of those things that, and I don't even think it would be a really expensive, in terms of the grand scheme of things, really expensive things to do. But for some reason, we can't do it.
I agree with you. We are constitutionally required to give every child, every student, basically an equal opportunity and equal education. And that's what the genesis for, in the 1960s, I can't remember the name of the bill, the ID bill that was passed to federal level that then became Chapter 766 here in Massachusetts. And the idea that we place a financial burden on a municipality that has a student that needs to be sent out of that municipality to be educated, to me, just creates this bureaucratic, administrative chaos. And I guess unpredictability would be the better thing. I've had discussions with colleagues specifically on special education transportation. Why do we basically leave it to the towns to pay and then get some sort of reimbursement for it? Why isn't that just a budget item at the state level where the transportation is provided under state contract to the individuals and the town is not responsible for that? Now, it would result in municipalities getting a little less money, but they're paying
for increases in transportation.
Exactly.
That would be on 2.5%.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think the state should do that. I think ultimately, although there has been no discussion about this as far as I'm aware, the state should really look at just funding its 766 schools. I would tell you, it is a struggle. Whenever we have an education bond bill, in the past, I have filed amendments. For instance, if it's a technology bond bill for our public schools, I have filed amendments to make sure that our 766 schools who educate our public school students also have access to those bond funds, with the idea that that may take some pressure off of tuition, which is then passed on to the municipalities. I have had no luck with that. I've done it in terms of facilities as well. A lot of the 766 schools own the property that they educate the students on. Others lease the property, so it gets a little complicated. But they are not eligible to go through school building authority to get capital improvement needs met. They're not eligible. Again, that would take some of the pressure off of them, spread the cost across the state, and when the pressure is relieved of 766, that helps relieve some of the tuition pressures. We have 766 schools that have to do a lot of fundraising in order to balance their budgets. So the system, while it does a really good job, I would argue it does the best job in the country in terms of educating students that have special education needs. It's not a real good, logical system in my mind. And I visited dozens of the schools. Within the last month, I've been back to Granite Academy and over to Cardinal Cushing to meet with students and administrators and to hear their concerns. It's just not a good funding mechanism. So I agree with you that ideally we should say these students, to the extent they can be educated locally, that their needs can be met, that's done and it's paid for locally. And if they have to go to another program where there's transportation or it's a residential program, that should be the state's responsibility. I think it would just make funding much clearer, easier, and I know one of the most unpredictable things that James mentioned is you just don't know if somebody's going to move into a district. Or two people move into a district, and there goes your budget, even if it's a transportation, not a residential program. And so I agree, but I do want to say that our 766 schools do a really good job, and they're facing pressures now over at Cardinal Cushing because of the immigration issues in Washington. They lost 12 employees, which impacts a few dozen students, and when you factor in families as well, impacts hundreds of people, just because people who had temporary protected status may no longer have that and therefore are not able to work at places like Cardinal Cushing. And so there's just a lot of pressures everywhere, but ideally, and I do think it's something we should strive for, and again, I've had the conversation that it should be state responsibility to fund special education, remove it from the municipalities, and put safeguards in place so that there's not this moving of students to 766 schools just to avoid any educational responsibility, put it on the state. But I think those type of safeguards could be put in place.
What does it take to get that done?
It would take at least a commission. There was talk about when you look at the Chapter 70 funding formula, there's a commission for that. There's a lot of different commissions, and generally people say, oh, another commission, but commissions do play a valuable role in not only just planting a seed, but then finding out what's necessary to make that seed grow into a change in policy. And so it's a long process.
Is it possible to start it tomorrow?
You know, it's a good question.
I mean, that's a great point.
You know, could something be added to the budget, or could legislation be filed to create a commission to look at funding? There could be legislation that's been filed, and I'm unaware, we have about 7,000 bills.
Yep.
I will check to see if there has been one filed, and if not, then we will definitely take a look at it, and
You guys would be co-signers on it? of
yeah,
course.
look for an opportunity to want to do it in the budget. We're late in the legislative process, so it's unlikely anything would happen with it this current legislative session, but I think, why not? I'll do that.
Thanks.
I think there has been something filed in the House, I can check, or in the past.
Yeah, I think there have been bills to look at it, but I don't know what's happened with them. But we'll take a look, one, to see if there has been a bill filed, and two, whether we can co-sponsor it and try to spur it on, and if not, or even if there has been, then certainly for next session,
Awesome.
look at filing something to
Yeah,
create a
super
commission that will,
important.
that will look at it.
Super important. Yeah, thank you.
And it's a big issue with Rep. Kane, I think Rep. Kane
Yes.
filed that.
Yeah, she would be the most likely one, yes.
Just one other thing to mention would be the graduation requirements, graduation competency, just some concerns there regarding potential funding for any mandates that may come out of that action, specifically around the FAFSA form being completed as a graduation requirement, and requirements for additional program of studies offerings at the high school that could require additional staffing too.
What is your opinion on early college? There are a number of them, so I'll say specifically, since a lot of the money from the millionaire's tax has gone ill-advisedly, in my opinion, I would have preferred it to go directly to Chapter 70. In particular, we're investing a huge amount of money, a lot of it in our local community colleges, which I value them, but in the grand scheme of things, I think that would have been better coming down here directly and just being apportioned. We didn't decide to do that, so there's not a lot of money coming down. However, what they are proposing, and what we're moving to some extent, is that they allow students, talented students, representative from Chelsea, Garcia, is a big advocate of this, and she takes the lead, but I always sign on with her. And what it would do is allow, in a perfect world, juniors and seniors, maybe sophomores, to take courses through Quincy College, through the community colleges, Massasoit in this area, obviously, but online, potentially any community college, where they could earn credit not only towards an associate degree, but towards graduation from high school, so that you could eventually have students that are talented graduate a half a year, maybe more than that, just on the basis of courses they had taken through high school. And I will give you a specific example. It's my case. It's something I'm familiar with. Accounting. The accounting I got in Norwell High School was superb. My teacher was superb. When I went to Northeastern, I got A's for the first 101, 102, right up to 202. I had had it before. It was wasted time, and it was review, but that is designed to address things like that, whereby someone studying for nursing could take and they've got a terrific program in a number of community colleges. Could take their biology, could take their chemistry. Nights are during the summers as juniors or sophomores, somewhere in there, get credit and then turn around and apply that credit also to graduation from Rockland High School. What is your opinion of that concept?
I don't want to get out ahead of the school committee, you know, on policy issues, or current superintendent of schools. I can say that Rockland High School is aggressively reviewing and pursuing various career and college readiness programs from participating in the Career Pathways Grant program, discussions regarding early college, and dual credits for college. So, you know, intriguing and exciting, but then you have to peel back the onion on the details.
What type of details would hold up, for instance, a college course that's accredited in, let's make it simple, let's say accounting, and say that they're taking an accounting course and it's equivalent roughly, they have a standardized test they pass, to what's available in a high school. What would be the argument against that?
I don't particularly have one at the moment. I defer, you know, and consult with, obviously, the superintendent and the school committee, but also with the high school principal and the chair of our guidance department, Margie Black, who spearheads most of our efforts in this area. But we are open to any ideas that help our kiddos be college or career ready.
You see the potential where that could potentially save parents hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, the pushback we're getting is not from here, and this is from a number, the pushback we're getting comes not from places like Curry or Stonehill, and they're readily accepting these credits from it's the state schools, believe it or not. So that you could have, and when I say state schools, UMass, Lowell, they're the ones that are telling our community college, your chemistry is not good enough, you need to retake the exact same chemistry where we are, even if you have a student. So I guess what I'm picking up is that you are not opposed to that, at least in theory.
Correct.
And you could see where it would save parents an enormous amount of money, especially since I don't imagine what Northeast is probably well over $100,000 a semester when you roll everything in, so that you would have that. That is really, when I talk to constituents, that is in addition to the VOTEC and Friendship Home and Carl Gushing and a few other things. That is really one of the shining lights of what we're doing right, or at least what we're seeking to do right. And it's heartening to hear that at least there's no automatic pushback on that.
If it's good for kids and families, it's good for us.
Yeah. That's a good way to put that. I might steal that line.
If I can just jump in very quickly, so community college is now essentially free for anybody that wants to go to community college. And they're working on standardizing the course numbers, so that, as the representative said, if you take an accounting course at a community college, that it is basically a similar curriculum and has the same course identification number, so that if you transfer from a community college to a state university or college, they can look at that and know that it meets their criteria. It doesn't apply, as he said, to going to a private school, although some of them are readily accepting it, as he says, those credits. So that's in the works. Part of the concern about the four-year colleges is that the community college program has been pretty successful, and that they're worried that some students would just go to community college and then go to a private four-year institution or won't go further. And we're closely tracking the completion data. It's still too early to tell, but we're really interested in knowing somebody that enters in the community college program, how long is it taking for them to graduate with an associate's degree, or to transfer credits to a bachelor's degree, and how long for that process from date of enrollment in community college to graduation from with a bachelor's degree. Our numbers here in Massachusetts are decent compared to other states, but not as high as you would think, given that, you know, the value that we put in higher education and the resources we allocate to our public colleges. And the pipeline from high school to community college, Quincy College, for instance, has a pretty good program with the Quincy high schools North Quincy High and Quincy High School.
Yep.
Where students are getting a lot of credits and
Dual
are saving-
enrollment.
And dual enrollment are saving substantial money.
Correct.
Massasoit is doing that as well with Brockton. Unfortunately, it hasn't, I'm talking to them every time and hoping eventually they move east. Because I think particularly in this area, that a lot of, seem to be a lot of nurses. And the nursing field is a good example where this could really apply, because the chemistry and the anatomy at Massasoit works directly into the accreditation process, so, and they should be able, I would hope, they would be able to credit anatomy courses at the college level towards early graduation. And again, this just allows them to do this over the summer, and I don't mean to be flip, but it would keep them out of trouble. It would give them something to do during the summer, where those inclined, those high achievers would be able to go directly to school nights or weekends, or, as I said, during the summer, and get academic credit where otherwise, at least my generation, that was never available. It's never an option. And I wish it were.
So from the budget standpoint, Doug, are you good with what you need to present to these guys, or can you give them, do you have more in your PowerPoint, or do you want to send them your PowerPoint as well?
I've sent them the presentation that I gave at the prior meeting, so they have that, and I'm happy to follow up, more offline. I think really my take home is, again, when I talk about state aid, I'm looking at net, the receipts less the assessments, because you can look at a couple $100,000 increase in Chapter 70, but it's negated by all the other increases in our assessments, and just 0.87% just does not work for any community, but especially a community like Rockland. But I'm happy to talk more about some of the details offline, but that's really my take-home message, and that's why I really had this one image up.
Yeah, I don't, and it's not for you guys. I've always appreciated the work you guys have done for the town of Rockland. I don't feel very confident, though, coming off this conversation, that anything that we could have said is going to make any kind of a change up there. That it sounds as though what you guys are presenting, at least from what I'm hearing, is that in a lot of ways the system at Beacon Hill is broken. Every formula needs to be revisited, and we just need to look at the whole thing and get what you get. You don't get upset. Figure it out on this level. And Senator, I see you nodding, and for me, that's incredibly discouraging that a 0.87 was an actual serious budget proposal from the governor, because it's not even close to what we're used to receiving. We didn't do anything to deserve that. We've been a good partner to the state over the years with anything that any initiatives that they've asked us to carry forward. To see a 0.87% increase is incredibly disheartening, and yeah, I mean, for lack of a better word,
May I ask again what communities you used? We have
Hingham,
staff that.
Hingham, Duxbury, Norwell, Situate.
Hingham, Duxbury.
They all have higher increases on their Chapter 70 funding than
Situate.
the town of Rockland does, which is egregious.
One of the standard reports they do, I've done this for the superintendent in Norwell, because he's asked. He always he feels rent them, so we rent them in Milford, but I could certainly have them do the exact same analysis and tell you exactly what happened, and get that to you. I will do that.
I think from our standpoint, we need you guys in the governor's office, making noise. And honestly, we need it from our Plymouth County commissioners. I don't know if you guys are familiar with our Plymouth County retirement funding that we're increasing. That a deal was made years before any of us were in our current positions. Before Doug was our town administrator, that we would increase our retirement contributions. Obviously, there was mistakes made in the past. Like, it sounds like things happened at Beacon Hill. Things weren't done properly down here as well. And there was no funding source for Plymouth County retirement. So we're aggressively now contributing, I think, $6.3 million right now, and going up to $9.3 million by the year 2031 per year. We've asked for a little bit of a clawback from the county commissioners and the treasurer's office, and they have pretty much told us, no, it's not going to happen. There is money there that we could be using potentially to fund some of these things. So I don't know if you guys have any pull with any of the Plymouth County commissioners, or Treasurer Tom O'Brien, or if there's any other avenue that we can take in order to get people to listen to us, that we're doing everything we can to be fiscally responsible and do our jobs, but we're not getting any help. There's no help coming from anybody at this point. In fact, they're just making it even more difficult for us. It's like, we were okay with 14%. And they come back at 19.7? You know, we were looking at it, I said, all right, we came into the budget season with $2 million. Oh, $2 million, that's a, we've had worse deficits at the start of the season before. We close it. And I can't even tell you, I mean, I never have been this discouraged coming out of a budget discussion than I am right now, because I don't feel as though there's any ability at the State House to get any of this stuff done, or to even listen to what the real concerns are of the residents of the suburban communities in Massachusetts.
Well,
You know, you mentioned about money being taken away from substance abuse, aid, right? The governor, when she was the Attorney General, took $350 million away from the cities and towns from an opioid settlement to create a substance abuse department. Where's that money? I mean, how many relatives are working for $100,000 a year up there, right? That's money that should be used. That could have been going to the cities and towns. Somebody on this board said it earlier. I think it was Mr. O'Donnell. He said, trust us. Let us screw up our town, right? You know, we can do it ourselves. We don't need, the State House screwing up our communities.
Well, part of the ones, and I know Doug is working on this, so that in Hanover as well, the arrangements that allowed cannabis to be, and I did not vote for that.
That's another one.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
taken right out from our-
that's a very
right.
We
significant
did everything
one.
we were told to do,
That's
right out of our
And per
pockets.
direction, I'm waiting for you folks are coming up with a solution. I would come up with a more draconian solution. I would go back to the way it was and leave it there, and I will tell you why. Number one, they committed to that, and that was Rockland and Hanover assumed these facilities were going to contribute. But they've also, I don't know if you're aware, you probably are, but they've even reined in the ability for those facilities to make a charitable contribution. And yes, obviously, you don't want them funding the Girl Scouts or sponsoring municipal teams at the,
Sure.
but something as simple as buying a new van for the senior center, or buying something for the police force. They're no longer allowed to do that.
Well,
Everything is at the state level.
Rep. DeCoste, we did everything right. We followed every single rule. We
I
submitted all the
understand
backup
that.
paperwork. We put it towards that we had full transparency on every single thing we did, and they still took the money out of our pockets.
And that's
Because they
costs
decided that
hundreds
they
of
could put
thousands a
it
year,
in their districts
It's
rather than our
millions.
district.
millions a year.
It's
Millions.
Millions, yeah. What did we get from the first dispensary that year that the HCA was valid?
Yeah, I
It
got
was
a
like
lot of numbers spinning in my head
550,000
right
or
now.
something. I think it
Yeah.
was like over $500,000. And we invited 4 dispensaries, right, into Rockland.
We played ball. We opened up the gates of the
So-
town for this revenue stream,
Right.
and then the revenue stream was taken away from us after we did it. And some of the decisions that were made were based on the fact that that revenue stream would exist.
Now, Steve, you asked for an
Exactly.
example of waste. There's, if you looked at everything surrounding the administration, the establishment of cannabis, you will find waste.
But they
And you'll
took it
find
from
some-
your district
Yes.
and put it into their district, whatever district that is. They took it right out of your district.
I would say they also stored it to a pretty big bureaucracy that's getting
Of
very
course.
well paid and
Yeah.
well funded.
Yeah.
5 years was the HCA, only for 5 years. And I calculated in my head, we lost potentially $10.5 million because of that. And,
So if I can just go back to your
yeah.
expression of no hope.
Yeah, it's-
Times are difficult.
John, we've known each other for a long
I
time.
know.
I'm not usually this glib. You know?
But no, and I appreciate, one, you being direct, and two, I know that representatives and senators across the state are going through this same process, coming to the local level, conveying what's going on at the state, and then listening to what's going on at the local level. I know, I won't speak for the representative, but I will. I know what he's gonna do. I know what I'm gonna do. We're gonna go back, and when it comes time to have input into the budget, we're gonna push really hard for increased local aid and tell the stories of what we've heard in our communities, because you're not unique. Every community in my district, it's the same thing. And so if the representative goes, and I go, and the senator east of here, west of here, south of here, does the same thing, hopefully we'll have an impact. It has occurred in the past in some areas where there's been a groundswell of members saying, we gotta do something about this. And I'm hopeful that this year will be one of those years where everybody expresses the concern strongly, conveys what they've learned at the local level, and there's a reaction to it. And that reaction's positive. But that's my hope. Consider me naively optimistic, but on that, I am somewhat hopeful, but times, they're tight, and more than anything else, just uncertain.
Senator, I've always been an optimist. I don't consider myself that anymore. But
Even in tight times, I mean, towns that have, more income much more income than we do, are getting
That's
more.
very frustrating.
So,
And I see one of my communities, oftentimes will look at what Rockland gets one year and say, what about us? And then the next year, Rockland might do a little better, and, I mean, won't do as well, and the other town will do better, and then Rockland, so what about us? There's a community in my district where that back and forth, a little
So why
less
does
than
Holbrook
the
hit
past.
us?
I'm sorry?
So why does Holbrook hit us?
Actually,
Holbrook.
can I make one point? Like, that dynamic is very real, you're absolutely right, and that makes it incredibly hard for us.
Yes.
Because when I'm clicking on that cherry sheet email, it's like I feel like I'm rolling the dice at a casino or something, like, are we gonna get an extra million or not? And it just feels completely arbitrary from year to year, and so those big swings make it really hard to budget.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you know, but I just wanted to emphasize that point.
And so we have one more thing, and it's not necessarily budget related, but Senator, you brought it up about trying to get MWRA down here. So if you'd be interested in sticking around for just a couple minutes, Doug has a quick presentation as to where that process is.
Good.
So that you guys have an idea of where we are on infrastructure for this house growth.
All right, I guess we're pivoting to that. And we did have a meeting several weeks ago, could have been a couple months ago. Thank you to the schools for coming. I know that the cannabis discussion kind of drove you out, but
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Yes, and so they have heard part of this before. So I've given some updates in the past. We started with a larger regional group going all the way out to Situate, Cohasset, Hull to look at a potential regional expansion. We hired a consultant, pooled our resources, did an initial feasibility study, and for some of those towns that are farther out, it just really didn't make economic sense, for anyone. So we've tightened the scope. So it's really just the Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks, a portion of Hingham, and a portion of Hanover. So it's a much smaller geographic region. With the senator and the rep's help, we did have a recent meeting with MWRA staff, and we went over a number of issues. Certainly, their preliminary waiver of their membership fee is very helpful, but I want people to understand that even if us individually or as a group were to make it through the process, there's still, I think the current estimate roughly would be $130 million construction build-out cost, which would be solely on the backs of the taxpayers in the community. And we've made that direct appeal already to our legislators here. Is there any way the state can help us with construction, because it's just not affordable for us? So that's a big ask. We've made that before, and I see that they're jotting that down again. We also asked the MWRA about potentially extending their deadline for that waiver. That waiver of the fee is not indefinite. There is a deadline. We talked a lot just about some of the details of how it would work. Would it be different types of water authorities that would have to manage something like this? Should it be the existing authorities? Are there preferences for that? Does the MWRA have a preference as far as regional applications versus individual applications? I mean, there's a lot of kind of technical detail that needs to be sorted through. So we're all very interested in pursuing this, both for increased capacity, which can help fund additional economic development and tax growth. It can also help fund additional housing, which we all need, and help control housing prices. So we know there's that. It can also help us with some of the PFAS-related issues, because that's obviously addressed at those treatment plants. It poses a lot of very technical engineering issues once you start commingling water from different sources that have different types of treatment, and how that all gets sorted out. So I guess in a big picture summary, we got some preliminary feedback. We're coming back as a group to kind of fine tune what our next steps are. Hopefully they will extend that deadline a little bit further on the application waiver. But again, kind of the same sort of conversation we had before, $130 million. And again, this isn't for all the towns. This is for a portion, a corner, of each of our communities, is just not going to be realistic for us, given all the other issues we're facing, as evidenced above my head. And so we could really use some assistance with that as we flesh this out a little bit further. So that's the big picture update.
I had a question. Is the build-out coming from the artery that goes through Union Point?
Yeah, it would start at Union Point, and then conceptually, one branch would kind of go straight south into Abington, and then the other branch would kind of go east, toward Hingham, and then wrap into Hanover. Yeah, and we've some of the recent zoning we did, like the MBTA community zoning, which is fulfilling that state mandate and that state policy directive. This is directly tied to actually trying to implement that. So it's just more to follow, but I just want to keep that ask alive. Thank you.
Gentlemen, as always, appreciate your time. We appreciate the partnership that we've always had with you guys. I think we as a board all can agree we have the obligations to speak truth to power, and you guys feel the same way, and you guys go speak truth to whatever power you answer to at this point. And with that being said, I appreciate you guys coming down. Hopefully we can have you guys again at some other point.
Anytime.
Yeah,
Thank you. Guys.
Thank you both.
Shake everyone's hand and,
All right, so next on the agenda,
Thank you. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
next on the agenda, draft annual town meeting warrant article list. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. So I included in your packet my preliminary list of warrant articles, and this is something that I actually have running all year round. As soon as we get to the annual town meeting, I'm always starting the list for the next year's annual town meeting, and the point of that is just so that I don't forget anything. As soon as an idea comes up, we put it on the list. So what's shown on this preliminary list is by no means final. Many of these things could come off. Again, it's just to make sure we didn't forget anything. I'll kind of quickly just list a few of them. In the special town meeting, one of the requests that the school department has, if we're able to fund it, is a $100,000 article funded from free cash to update their math curriculum. And they're looking for that in the special because that's something I think that's more cost effective for them if they were to purchase certain materials before July 1. When we get into the annual town meeting, it's all the usual things with operating budgets and enterprise fund budgets, capital articles. There is a request again from the school department for $500,000 from free cash for their out-of-district funding. So that's something that is a priority for them. We're also looking at, on a smaller note, adding a new revolving fund for the library as they're now housing the WIC program, and it would help them account for that rent coming in, and they'd be able to pump that back into library programming. We're going to recommend again an appropriation from the opioid settlement funds, consistent with the policies that we've talked about in the past. There's a number of potential open space acquisitions. We've spoken about a very prominent one in executive session. There's also a couple of small ones that were previously voted at town meeting many years ago, long before I was here, but they were never acted on. And in working with the Open Space Committee, they'd really like to lock that up. And unfortunately, with some of the property owners, there's no one left who is able to legally sign off and execute deeds, things like that. So we're looking at some eminent domain takings with no monetary damages because they've been previously gifted to the town. There's likely going to be a request from South Shore Regional Vocational Technical School to update the regional agreement to add in the town of Pembroke. And that depending on how you look at it, could be a good or a bad thing. Maybe a bad thing if you're worried about your child being able to get into the school, because now there's a whole nother school that's going to be taking up slots. If you're more worried about the financial aspect from the town of Rockland, that's sort of a better thing for us, because we'll likely have a lower proportional share and a relatively lower assessment. Potentially adopting a mass general law regarding alcohol licenses. I need to dig into that one a little bit more. There'll be several Community Preservation Act projects that will be on there. We're also hoping that this is a work in progress. Not sure if it'll be fully baked in time for the town meeting, but Courtney's been spending a lot of time on the Hingham Street Corridor Improvement Project, and as part of that road widening, signalization improvement effort, there are slivers of land just outside the road layout that may need to be taken. And Courtney and council have been working with the landowners, so this is not a hostile act by any means, but we need to do appraisals and get stamped plans, and so we might need to have an article to both appropriate funds and take some of those very small portions of property to be able to allow us to do that project. And then we're also been, in the planning department, in concert with Courtney and the building department, looking at some blight and nuisance bylaws, and I know they talked about that at the previous presentation with the CDBG consultant, but we're looking potentially at a bylaw and adopting a mass general law, all to help us, tackle, what's always a difficult problem in every community. And then lastly, the planning board will be proposing a zoning bylaw update specifically related to the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units. After we had adopted our zoning, the state changed the rules, so little small pieces of our zoning are out of compliance, so this would just correct it to be in conformance with changes in state law. I believe that's the only zoning article that we'll have. So just big picture, that's my first cut at the list. If there's anything you guys can think of that I might be missing at any time, please shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'll keep updating this every week, and we'll keep it on the agenda as we go forward.
Thank you, Doug. Next on the agenda, other new business not reasonably anticipated?
I have none.
Okay, old business, FY27 budget, we covered. MWRA water supply expansion study update, we covered. Other old new business not reasonably anticipated?
I have none.
Town administrators reporting correspondence, Doug.
All right, we have three quick ones tonight. The first is I am very pleased to report on the charter update front, as I think somebody mentioned already. I have a page and a half of actions that have been taken in the legislature. It's been a bizarre process, this particular one, but the bottom line is, when you literally look at the bottom line of actions listed here on February 12th, the action says it was enacted and laid before the governor. So it is sitting on the governor's desk. So she has 10 days from the 12th to sign it or to veto it, or taking no action if it becomes law. So I feel very optimistic.
She better not veto that.
Yeah, I feel very optimistic we're going to be
Could
good
you
to
imagine?
go.
Can you imagine what my rant would have been then?
I got your back on this.
Yeah, so no, I think we're good. And so once it's, I'm not doing anything until it is signed by the governor and I have the piece of paper. Then we'll be back, and there will be a lot of follow-up that we'll be talking about. The second item is a really great update for the Recreation Department. And Jean Blaney, our Recreation Director, who you all know, is never one to brag, and she, is always reluctant for accolades. But this is a big deal. So I just want to read a little bit. So Jean received confirmation that the Town of Rockland's Recreation Department is the 2026 award recipient for the Massachusetts Recreation and Park Agency of the Year for program outreach for their mental health awareness program. And what's so impressive about that is this was not just competing against some smaller regional communities. This was a statewide award competing against some big communities like, Brookline or the city of Boston, or you name it. And our little rec department did an outstanding job. And so I'll read a little bit more. It says, this award is presented to the agency that used creative and innovative concepts or ideas around a new or improved program over and above regular programming that demonstrates a great benefit to the community and the facility. and there's going to be an awards dinner on March 24th at the Mass Mutual Center in Springfield. So I want to congratulate Jean and especially all of her staff that worked on that. It's really, really great news. And then my last issue is I also have some really good news. This is a long time coming, many, many years in the making, but our sewer commissioners have hired a permanent sewer superintendent. So it really is fantastic news. The woman's name is Hillary Waite, and I believe her start date is going to be March 30th. She has some excellent experience that is directly relevant. I think she will hit the ground running and will also be able to really grow into this position and grow into the community as we look at opportunities with the new charter. And I also, in particular, I want to thank the sewer commissioners because they worked incredibly collaboratively with Courtney and our HR department to have a professional process, and it really paid off. We have an outstanding person that we're all really excited about working with. And once she's on board at the end of March, maybe sometime in April, we'll ask her to come in and introduce herself to all of you. So
Perfect.
That's all I have.
Great news. Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
Select Board comments. Comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Select Board, and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Mr. O'Donnell. You already told me it's 7.5 minutes.
Mike was a little worried. I should have the time, so I've
Sorry, John.
stricken conciliatory tone. I'm only going to try to do one of these a month. In honor of Black History Month, I want to take a moment to celebrate two impactful black leaders in our nation's history. Their words echo throughout time and still resonate in today's political climate. Their calls for liberty for all and for the next generation to become a part of this American experiment ring true today, as clear as the Liberty Bell rang during the birth of our nation in Philadelphia. Frederick Douglass served as the U.S. Marshal, Recorder of Deeds, and U.S. Minister Resident to Haiti under President Hayes, Garfield, and Harrison, respectively. He was born into slavery in 1818, escaped to the North in 1838 at the age of 20, eventually making a home for himself in Massachusetts. During his early years as a free man, he became a prominent abolitionist orator. In 1848, he became the only black person to attend the Seneca Falls Convention, the first women's rights convention fighting for women's suffrage. In 1878, during the Reconstruction era after the Civil War, he was asked to speak by the Lincoln Post of the Grand Army of the Republic at Union Square, New York. During that speech, he states, "Fellow citizens, I am not here to fan the flame of sectional animosity, to revive old issues, or to stir up strife between the races. But no candid man, looking at the political situation of the hour, can fail to see that we are still afflicted by the painful sequences both of slavery and of the late rebellion. In the spirit of the noble man whose image now looks down upon us, we should have charity toward all and malice toward none. In the language of our greatest soldier, twice honored with the presidency of the nation, let us have peace. Yes, let us have peace, but let us have liberty, law, and justice first. Let us have the Constitution, with it its 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, fairly interpreted, faithfully executed, and cheerfully obeyed, in the fullness of their spirit and the completeness of their letter. References to President Lincoln and Grant give credence to the celebration of American values and celebrate a large portion of his life's work, advocating for the abolishment of slavery, citizenship via naturalization, and granting freed slaves the right to vote. The next black leader I want to remember is John Lewis, a civil rights leader and a U.S. congressman known as the conscience of the Congress for his lifelong commitment to nonviolent activism and human rights. John Lewis marched with Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma on Bloody Sunday in 1965, where he suffered a fractured skull after being beaten by state troopers. He was a believer in nonviolent protest. His and others' actions during the civil rights movement showed America and the world that there is a difference between lawful and moral. Sometimes following the law, like segregation, isn't the moral choice, and we must break the law to force change, or as John Lewis put it, never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. During his final days, he wrote an essay titled, "Together, You Can Redeem the Soul of Our Nation," to be published upon his death. It was originally published in the New York Times on July 30th, 2020. John Lewis died on July 17th that year after a battle with pancreatic cancer. I suggest you read the entire speech if you have the time. In the interest of time, I'll share some of my favorite parts. While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people motivated simply by human compassion laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and around the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington. Though I was admitted to the hospital the following day, I just had to see and feel it for myself that after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on. Though I am gone, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say, a way in. And then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said, we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said, it is not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said, each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. He said, when you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state. It is an act, and each generation must do its part. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what is called good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love, and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now, it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. The world needs more people like Frederick Douglass and John Lewis. People are afraid to speak out against affronts to the American ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness at the risk of their own well-being, with the hope of making a better world for future generations. I continue to be inspired by these titans of America's past and others like them. I share them with you today to hopefully inspire others to stand up and contribute to the furtherance of the American dream, to stand up, to engage in local civics. I applaud everyone who has pulled papers to run for elected office in our town election. I encourage others to step up and seek appointments for the many vacancies on our town committees. Even if politics isn't your thing, there are many local organizations that are looking for new volunteers that serve the community. And youth sports groups, local churches, and the Rockland Food Pantry are examples of local nonprofits that make a lasting impact for our neighbors and the children of Rockland. These organizations are always looking for volunteers and for the next generation to ultimately take the reins.
Thank you, Steve. Select Board Member Elwood.
I'm not even gonna try to follow that.
I was gonna say, you usually say get involved. You put that at the end, too.
I get nothing.
You got nothing.
I'm gonna punt.
Select Board Member Needham.
All right. Basically, just three things tonight, they're all basically characteristic of what I would consider world class. I'd like to first thank Chair O'Loughlin for your continued leadership of our board and for your passionately advocating for what we need tonight with the state and just in general. So I want to thank you for that. Select Board Member O'Donnell, I just want to thank you for the time and the effort and the thought that you put into your comments. As an aside, just think you're awesome. So thank you, and that's what I would commend as world-class effort. And just a true inspiration of using your platform to make the world a better place. And I really admire that. And I would like to congratulate Jean Blaney and the entire Rockland Rec Department for your being awarded and receiving this recognition against statewide contemporaries. Rockland does not have nearly the resources, of the others that were also in that field, but you have the creativity and the work ethic and the determination to also make our town the best it can be. So I really want to thank you and commend you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Vice Chair Childs?
I have 5 things. I'll keep them short.
Everybody tonight.
Okay, yay Rockland. Our residents stepped up once again, and there's gonna be at least one name on every single slot on the ballot this year except for the planning board. So if anybody can step up for the planning board, that would be fabulous. Jean Blaney, go team go. I think that Tiffany really, and Doug really put it concisely. You're a gem in our community. And Steve, thank you for your thoughtful speech. I want to add that another civil rights beacon died this morning, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. So, let's see. Oh, and I'm super thrilled about our sewer superintendent and cannot wait to meet her. This was a long time coming, and thank you to our team to vet her through a very professional protocol. So I appreciate that. And I know we were talking about a really dismal budget this year, if you've watched our entire meeting. But I want to remind people that getting shovels in the ground on the base will bring us, at conservative guesstimates, $4 to $6 million in tax revenue per year. And they are hoping to get a temporary water source. They are funding the feasibility study for it through the Myers Avenue plant in Abington. And we just need, I guess, a public discussion with the Water Commission. I touched base with Debbie Dooner. They're going to reschedule the one that had to be canceled soon. So please go to that meeting, make your voice heard. But that's another revenue stream that's right at our fingertips.
Thank you, Lori. So I'll follow John's footsteps and have no comments tonight. I promised Chris Panika, who's on school vacation this week at WRPS, that we'd be done by 9 o'clock. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor? Tiffany?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Lori?
Yep.
And myself. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Great.